All right, we're talking divisional round bets for the NFL playoffs. We're going to go through the various markets, starting with the ATS and money line picks. Steve, you are liking the Commanders this week here to potentially cover against the Detroit Lions. This is one of the heavy spreads. I was actually considering laying with the Lions. Why do you advise against that?
Because at the NFL level, plus 9.5, that is a huge, huge number, especially for two playoff teams. Like, this is not an 0-16 team playing like a 16-0 team. This is a very good Commanders team playing a very good Lions team. To go plus 9.5, do you know how bad you have to lose? Like, think of how bad
Yeah,
teams got
the
spanked. Like,
Lions do it though. The
think of
Lions
how
do
bad
it.
the Eagles spanked the Packers. They won by 12.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that was a kind of a competitive game. The Steelers only lost by 14, and that I felt
Right.
like they should have lost by fucking 20.
Right. It's hard to lose by double digits in the NFL.
Yeah.
It really is hard to lose by double digits in the NFL. This is,
Get-
I mean, this is a late field, like a nothing field goal costs you this spread.
Yeah,
A
a lot of backdoor
safety,
possibilities.
lot of ways to lose this bet. And that means there's a lot of ways to win this bet. I am happy. Giving me 9.5 points for an offense that has Jayden Daniels on it.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
I'd
That's crazy.
I'd probably even play this like tease it up to plus 10 and a half, get yourself with the hook there. But I would definitely consider it. I like the Lions to win this game, and I like them to win it comfortably. But it is always tough to lay 9.5 in a divisional round game, especially against a red hot Commanders team. Eric, your thoughts on the Commanders here, and also you're going back with your Texans. You picked them on the money line, got that plus value last week. Against the Chargers, you like them plus 8.5 here against the Chiefs. So thoughts on the Commanders, and then your frisky Texans.
Yeah, love this call from Steve, right? For two playoff teams that have advanced to the second round, 10 points is just way too big a number, right? And they have a dynamic budding superstar in Jayden Daniels. I think that they can certainly keep this one competitive. And we know that Dan Quinn is going to continue to go for it on fourth down and to prioritize touchdowns over field goals. So I think there are just so many outs to this one.
Mm-hmm.
Similar line of thinking for my Texans getting 8.5 points at the Chiefs. I think the argument is really just far more practical, right? I said last week that the Texans should have been favorites on the strength of their defense alone, and that defense absolutely showed out. But more than anything, like this Chiefs team, they're trying to play one score games. Like all but like 4 of their wins this year have been single scores or less. So I think that we've got a game plan advantage to where Kansas City, is not going for style points here. They know that, they just need to get the dub, survive and advance, and 8.5 points will certainly cover you when you have when they win that one score game. So not going to go money line on this one like I did last week, but 8.5 is just flatly too much.
Yeah, I wish I liked more spreads this week. Honestly, like I'm getting much more invested in the prop market just because this one feels really tricky to me because I agree with everything you're saying. I think your analysis is spot on. I rode the Texans, I remember ATS last year against the Ravens in this divisional round. And it was like they held in there for a while and things kind of just got out of hand in the second half. I feel like that maybe is what we could see happen here. Andy Reid has had a lot of time to sit on his hands and drop some creative play calls here that I think could bust this one open. So it's tough, but I totally understand the logic from you. Yeah. Let's go ahead though. Steve, you're liking this game as well, but from a potential totals market standpoint. So tell us about that. What are you liking about the Texans Chiefs over 41 points?
Yeah, over 41.5 points that's a low number, right? Like, I know these teams have good defenses, but that's 21 points apiece. Like, that's not like that's pretty normal, right? In the NFL, I think the average, I don't know what the exact average points per game is, but I'm pretty sure it's over 21 points a game per team.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be a very low scoring game in a situation where, like, yeah, the defenses are good, but the offenses are good too. I do want to go back and give Eric his props on his bet. Again, these spreads are huge, way, way, way bigger than I'd take 8.5 points when the Jaguars were playing the Chiefs. So, like, this just feels like way too big of a spread. It's not like that. Again, they're not playing Jags, like, not for lack of a better term, right? They're not playing like just absolute punks. So I like that. Over 41.5. Listen, CJ Stroud gets hot, and this team could put up 42 points by themselves. I
Mhm.
mean, both these teams are, I mean, the Chiefs haven't scored over 30 this year, but the Texans are very good. And if both these teams just play average football, they beat the spread.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see how this total shakes out because 41.5 is a low number, but I mean, I think we are reminded with Algier back at linebacker for the Texans last week, how dominant this defense can be. Stingley looked great on the outside there, made multiple plays on the ball. I was also very impressed with Will Anderson Jr. The way him and Hunter kind of go together on that D line is scary. So all of a sudden, I'm starting to take the Texans real serious, and I think more than anything, maybe even better than the total. Maybe I am talking myself in the Texans. Maybe I am talking.
You have to. If Vegas feels like the line is 8.5 points, like Kansas City's not winning this game 9-0.
I think that's
like
another
eight
one
and a
I would
half
tease.
points. Like 8.5 points means points need to be scored enough so to create that gap, because
True.
this is not going to be a 9-0 game. So you're looking at what, 27 to 18 or something stupid like that.
Sure.
I don't know. Like, it has to be something, but you're going to get to this number.
Eric, staying in the totals market, you like Eagles Rams under 44.5. What are you seeing here in the city of brotherly love?
Yeah, this was a bet that I placed last week, and I'm going right back to the well. A lot of this is the strength of the Eagles defense, really since their bye week. They've just been playing on an absolute another planet, especially in their secondary. I do have to give flowers to Javon Curse and the defense for the LA Rams. Steve has been banging that drum for a while. Dude is playing absolutely lights out. But what I think is different here than what we saw in that Minnesota game is I don't think that you can abuse the Eagles offensive line the way that the Rams did against the Vikings. So I think this one is going to be a relatively closely contested game. I think it's going to be a lot of ball control. I think it's going to come in under 44.5.
Okay. And sticking with that game, I think that kind of builds on my first prop of the night that I'd like to throw out in the player prop market. It's Saquon Barkley over 99.5 rushing yards. This is minus 155 at ESPN bet. So yeah, a little bit heavy of a glass of juice to drink, but my thoughts here are a lot like yours, Eric. Like, more than anything, this is kind of a bet on the Eagles defense, right? Like, because I think they are good enough to slow down the Rams offense. Philly will get out to a lead. They'll want to run, chew the clock, just like they did last week against Green Bay. This line at most books is 111.5. And at ESPN, you can drink this juice to get it down to 99.5. We had the 98.5 line last week. Saquon, before that last drive, after that late interception from Jordan Love, was sitting at 98 yards.
Yeah.
And then he got over it on the first run, and then he had another one that got him well over it. But I think they're going to do even better of a job this week getting him involved. So I'm just going right back to it. He's hit this line in 8 of the last 10, 3 straight, including 255 against the Rams in week 12. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to saddle up here with Saquon Barkley, Steve.
I mean, until he proves otherwise, right? Why not? I mean, the guy's like, seems like he's a lock for 100 yards. I mean, if the lines are normally 111, Vegas has a real good history of being right around the right number. Usually if you lose by like 3 yards. So if they're spotting me 12 spots, I'm happy.
Eric, I want to throw it over to you though. I know you have or was it Steve? Yeah, you have a player prop in here for us as well. Again, every time it's about Keon Coleman, I think it's Steve. So talk about Keon Coleman. You like him potentially going over his prop this week?
Yeah, slightly going back to the well here. Last week, Khalil Shakir was my prop bet that cashed a ticket. This week, going to Keon Coleman over 22.5 receiving yards. Look, it has been a revolving door in this wide receiver room for the Buffalo Bills. But you look back to last week, and in most weeks, Keon Coleman is either 1 or 2 in snap share in terms of his opportunity and time on the field. So you like that. And specifically, he gets a beautiful matchup against Brandon Stevens of the Baltimore Ravens. credit to him. He has played a little bit better down the stretch run. He's not just, a complete liability back there, but a guy that can still get God. He's put up over 75 yards in the last 2 games, right? And is one of the leaders in receiving yards allowed. So like how this its individual matchup looks for Keon Coleman, especially in the context of him being out there a fair amount on Sunday.
Oh, okay. Steve, staying with the Buffalo Bills, you like James Cook over 12.5 rushing attempts. James Cook, I regretted it. I thought I should also dabble with his anytime TD because I felt like him or Josh Allen or both would find the end zone last week. I didn't get invested there with Cook, but the rushing attempts has been something very fun to bet this season. What do you like about Cook here going over this mark?
Yeah, the best way that teams can beat teams like the Ravens is to not let them have the ball, right? Like that's the number one way to beat this team. I'd be surprised if Ray Davis plays in this game, considering his brains nearly spilled out of his head in the last game, which, I hope he's fine. But if he's not, I expect James Cook to be used heavily. I also like Keon Coleman to be used heavily because they're going to need him more in this game, right? They kind of, once they got ahead, they stayed ahead, and it turned into a nothing burger last week. But they're going to want to control the clock. They're going to want to control and keep the ball more so out of Lamar's hands. And I think that's going to feed James Cook. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets 20 rushing attempts this game. Like, I think it'll approach that number.
Yeah, and I think when you're at this point in the season, like there comes a point, at least for me, especially in the running game, like of course you're gonna have to show some passing sets and run Ty Johnson out of there on a sweep, on a count, or something like that. But I think you get to a point where you got to have the ball in the hands of your best players, and that's James Cook. So I expect to see a heavy dose of him. 12.5 is a number I'm definitely going to give a look here. So I like that one as well. Eric, throwing it back to you. You are interested in a prop I've never bet in my life. I don't know if I would bet it. But talk about it here.
Yeah, now is your chance to dabble in this market. This is another prop that is a bit juicy, minus 135 to the under between the total of punts, 6.5 between Tampa Bay and Detroit. I talked about it when Steve was making his salient case for taking the points with the Commanders this week. Neither of these teams punt, right? They're always going for it on 4th down. They're always trying to score a touchdown over a field goal. Really what this is I took a long, hard look at the game total in this one. 55.5 is a real big number. So I think that we're going to see a lot of scoring, and this is a great way to get into that kind of shootout game script without having to, be tied to such a big number.
Okay. Yeah. I don't hate that either. I think that's like, I like betting the overs at Ford Field this year. It's been a recipe for success. It's a fast track. We know that. So I'm interested in getting invested in that game, but it's such a high number that maybe taking the under on the punts isn't a bad call. So, and especially like you said, like Dan Campbell, we know like how many times are these guys going to punt? Like realistically, you know,
they're descending it. It's Jayden Daniels is the only quarterback with 3 starts where the team hasn't punted this year, right? Like,
yeah,
they just don't do it. So I think this is a way to get into that shootout scenario without having to be tied to such a big number.
Okay. Steve, throwing it back to you, staying with this game. You like Jayden Daniels over 1.5 passing touchdowns. What are you thinking here with JD Honey?
That he's the 4th best quarterback in the league, or 5th best quarterback in the league, and he is playing at a bona fide racetrack in terms of just how fast the ball moves up and down that field. Listen, this is a proverbial dick measuring contest between these two head coaches. Like, Dan Quinn and Dan Campbell, they will look each other dead in the eye on their own 5-yard line and be like, I'm going for it on 4th and 15. And I wouldn't be shocked by either of them doing that, right? Dan Campbell's the guy who we know fakes punts on his own 25-yard line. I mean, that's just what we got out of these guys. Jayden Daniels is a generational talent, right? Like, we say that and we throw that term around a lot, but he's just that good. We're not seeing guys doing what he's doing this early in their careers. It's almost unheard of. 1.5 passing touchdowns against a bad defense. I like that. A defense that doesn't have like half their starters, their entire defensive line has been replaced. He's going to have time. I do want to go back to my previous bet and just let you guys know that I did the research. If the Chiefs and the Texans just score their average points, they will score 45 points between the two of them. The over-under is 41. Again, I want to go back to that and just let you guys know that. But Jayden Daniels, 1.5 passing touchdowns. Listen, Terry McLaurin may well get 3 touchdowns all on his own the way this guy explodes for touchdowns, right? I mean, we know when they get down there, yes, they do run it in quite a bit, but Zach Ertz and Terry McLaurin are red zone threats at this point. And you can't count out Dyami Brown being a long touchdown threat, right? Like 1.5. If he flukishly gets 1 touchdown on the first drive, you're feeling great. And it's not unheard of for this to happen. So I think this is a game that has a lot of points projected, and I doubt they're all going to come on the ground.
Yeah, usually starts out well in that scripted game plan, as you said, on those first couple of drives. So don't mind that play at all. I wish I would have taken that last week because I did end up dabbling for just about a quarter of a unit on his anytime touchdown line out there. So I'm going to stay with this game on a player you recommended, Steve. Dyami Brown, over 2.5 receptions, -150. This is at Bet365. I want to attack a game with a 55.5 point total on that fast track we talked about at Ford Field. This wide receiver corps is now mostly just Dyami Brown, Zacchaeus, McLaurin. They've really kind of filtered out the other guys, and these are their main targets. He's averaging 4.6 targets in the last 5 games. He has hit this line in the last 5 games. That's also why you're paying some juice on this one at -150. So I'm playing that there. Individually, I'm also going to be playing Jameson Williams over 3.5 receptions. This is -140 at FanDuel. The evolution of Jameson Williams has happened, and it feels like no one freaking cares because over 1,000 receiving yards this season. He's playing the same amount of snaps, almost identical over the last 4 weeks to Amon-Ra St. Brown. And while I would usually just take the receiving yards line, the Lions have really condensed this offense. And since week 2, JMO, he has 7 or more targets in 6 out of 7 games. He's hit this line in all of those. I expect Ben Johnson, give him a week off. I'll probably also take a little bit of parlay action with that receiving yards line. It is right around 51.5 at most books. Maybe tease that down, but Ben Johnson's going to get JMO the ball in his hands in short yardage, probably on some trick plays deep as well. And so for my Seth's good shit of the week parlay presented by Today's Country Music, I'm going JMO over 3.5 receptions. I'm going Dyami Brown over 2.5 receptions. I'm taking the Lions on the money line. That's giving us plus 212 at DraftKings Sportsbook. So giddy up, boys. Players no one's really thinking to play here. I'm taking a little bit different approach. I usually like to count on studs, but I'm counting on 2 guys who they're doing something for their squads in a game where, hey, we think points are aplenty.
I like it. Jameson Williams, what an ugly 1,000-yard season this was. Like
53 receptions. That's the whole thing. But
yeah, this has to be the ugliest 1,000-yard receiving season, like maybe of all time, because he did not look great for most of the season. So I'm not in love with this.
He looked good. He just had he had big games and then he had down games. So towards the end of the season, Eric, JMO really started to find somewhat of a balance where he was catching more than 2 passes a week, just based on 6 out of the last 7. He's had 7 or more targets and he is delivering them, at least catching 3 or 4 balls a week.
Yeah, he showed some nice floor down the stretch run, which previously wasn't associated with his game. And specifically this parlay, I love that you have 3 heavy favorites that you're parlaying together and getting a pretty nice plus number on. So these are the type of bets that I love to speculate with.
Yeah, absolutely.